Welcome back, everyone, to the CX Pulse podcast. I'm your host, Amelia Rose Earhart. On today's show, we're discussing the delicate balance between empathy and efficiency in contact centers, especially when it comes to AI. Now, our expert guest today is Leslie Oflahaven, LinkedIn learning instructor and owner of eWrite, which teaches people to write well for online readers. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm so pleased to be with you.
I am as well. Leslie, I have to say, as a former English major in my college years, I love language and I love how words can make such an impact. So before we get into our topic today, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became, to be such an expert in this role?
Well, we former English teachers have to stick together, don't we? So that was my first career. I was a high school English teacher and a college English teacher, but it's been a long time since that was my role. I've owned eWrite, a writing trainee consultancy, since 1996. And our mission is to help people learn to write well at work. So as the environment for communicating with customers is so dynamic, and as the contact center adds one channel after another, most of those new channels or newly added channels are written channels. And the people who work in contact centers, who started in contact centers communicating with customers on the phone, they're often ill-suited or unprepared to write to customers in email, chat, social media, text, or to develop chatbot content that customers can respond to. And that's where we step in. We want to help people learn to communicate with customers in writing.
Yeah, and in the reading I was doing of yours in preparation for our interview, what I really took immediately away from it was that empathy is scripted by humans, but really served by these AI opportunities, right? Served by the bots. And creating this empathetic approach by humans does take some practice. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the conflict that agents are facing in contact centers when talking about how to balance empathy with efficiency, which of course, efficiency is the overall goal.
Indeed. So I wish I could say that agents are balancing the empathy and the efficiency. I think candidly, this balance is being put on them. They are bearing it, not balancing it. By this, I mean, many agents, sadly, human agents, are discouraged from expressing empathy because their managers feel it will slow them down, or the legal department feels that expressing any type of empathy will increase legal risk. And so what they're offered instead as a connection behavior with customers is apology. The more stale the apology, the more common it is. We regret any inconvenience this may have caused, which is the world's most stale apology. And what modern customer care requires is expressions of empathy, where beyond saying we regret any inconvenience this may have caused, we say we understand how aggravated you are that you had to contact us 3 times to correct this invoice. We understand. Then you can say you're sorry as well. You've introduced the question of whether AI can help human agents express empathy. And yes, of course, in many ways, these systems can. They can recognize customer sentiment. They can offer agents the prepackaged language in the form of a template or a macro so that they can express this empathy. But recognizing when a customer needs empathy to allow you to solve their problem or answer their question, this is still mostly human.
Right. And you're so right. Those canned responses, they don't feel genuine. But when you speak to an agent who does sound empathetic, boy, it can keep everyone's patience level so much higher. But I can imagine that it does start to impact efficiency very, very quickly. So when efficiency goes down, that can lead to stressful environments in the contact center. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the value of AI when the stress is going up and the contact center is trying to remain empathetic? How do we balance all that when we're also keeping in mind those bottom line demands?
Well, it can expressing empathy requires either active listening or active and analytical reading. So the rep is taking in more information and taking it in more sincerely. And yes, expressing empathy in response to that can make an individual interaction a little bit longer, but the course of the interactions overall is shorter. So it's measuring the length of individual interactions versus the first contact resolution and the other opportunities to retain the customer. So AI can help, as I've said, it can help agents, especially when the thing they have to empathize with the customer about is a really painful or commonplace issue. So, for example, if your company raises rates and your contact center is slammed on a Tuesday because they raise the rates on a Friday and everyone is angry, then AI can help you by feeding you a range of empathetic responses because we know what the issue is. Or if you're an airline that's had a technical glitch or something like that, AI really can help you because there is an aspect of agent exhaustion that will tap out their ability to express empathy. And the AI systems can really support in that case.
And that's a great point because not everyone is naturally empathetic. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end of our interview, whether or not that can be taught. But before we get there, because this is such a fascinating topic here, lots of people are skeptical that AI may not be able to generate genuine empathy. But your company, eWrite, helps customer service agents in that matter. Tell us more.
This is a revolutionary thing to say, but I don't think agents need to express genuine empathy if empathy comes from their core heart. I don't think the job deserves that. My family deserves that kind of empathy from me, but that kind of empathy that might make me weep or something, then my job doesn't deserve that. And AI really can support us as we express workplace empathy. We can predict what customers will need understanding about. We can predict which situations they'll need understanding, and we can generate language that meets those predictable events. We also want to have agents who can express empathy for unpredictable events. We know if an airline passenger booked a wheelchair and the wheelchair wasn't available, we're going to need to empathize with that person about the wheelchair. But perhaps the person pushing the wheelchair was rough. We didn't really predict that. That person doesn't work for the airline either. Should we express empathy? A human will have to decide whether to express empathy in that situation.
I'm so glad you pointed out the difference there. That genuine empathy is different in the home and with our family and friends. But you're right, that workplace empathy just needs to be enough to be appropriate so that the customer feels heard and understood. That's such a good distinction there.
The empathy should never be insincere, like, I understand how frustrating this should be for you. We can't afford to do that, but we're at work and we can find the language to empathize, even if we're not revealing our inner heart.
Right. And that sincerity is picked up in the tone and the way that it's presented over the phone, especially. So, Leslie, can you give us a real life example of how a company who embedded empathetic communication has benefited from it?
Yes, I absolutely will. And I'm going to tell you about them. And then I'm going to look at the statistics right here so that I'm sure I quote them correctly. So this is a company that was called Bluegrass Cellular. It was a rural cell service provider that was bought by Verizon in November 2021, I believe. So they're not Bluegrass Cellular anymore, but the director of customer experience there, a woman named Robin Fentress, she attended a workshop I presented in November, and she really had an aha moment about how her agents were trained to say, I'm sorry, especially in a pause. When the customer was pausing, they would say, I'm sorry. But the customers really didn't perceive the words, those two words next to each other, I'm sorry, as sincere enough empathy. So they deepened their expressions. They said, I'm sorry, or I apologize. they restated what the customer was complaining about. So this is a demonstration of I heard you, and then they expressed empathy. So it took a little bit longer to have these expressions, but the results were wonderful. And here I'm reading them now. They saw a decrease in escalated calls of 45%. So that's a huge drop. They didn't have to involve the manager. The customer wasn't asking to speak to a manager. They saw a decrease in the number of formal customer complaints by 43%. That's a stunning drop. And another measure that really means a lot to me, because I think communication skills training is a matter of almost like civil rights for customer service agents. They saw a 26% increase in agent satisfaction.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. And you're right, that the balance of efficiency versus empathy is clear there. The efficiency skyrocketed with just a tiny little bit of empathy in those active listening techniques. And boy, with your types of skills with eWrite, you can make those tiny little tweaks and see a huge difference, right?
Yes, but the tweaks of what they were saying were small or tiny, as you've said, but the tweaks and how much permission they were given were huge. Remember, their manager said, you can say more than I'm sorry. You can and should restate everything you're hearing the customer saying. And maybe some of it's not accurate or maybe not even honest, but we're going to restate what we're hearing, and you're going to express empathy. And these measurable outcomes were stunning, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Giving that little bit of power back to the agent as well, which is always good all around. So tell us, can empathy be taught, or is this something that we're inherently born with or lacking?
Well, this is one of my favorite topics. So thank you for asking that question. Empathy at work can be taught. I believe it can be taught. Yes, because of course, the core belief in my business is that people can be taught to write better. I believe this in every way, that most people can improve their writing skills substantially. And yes, workplace empathy can be taught. It can be. And sometimes it's easy to teach because the person we're teaching is innately motivated to see another person's perspective. And sometimes it's a little harder to teach because the person we're teaching has been, I think, harmed or damaged by a work life of listening to complaints one after another, and they've maybe closed down a little, or they're suspicious that the customers are lying, that they're just coupon seekers, this kind of thing. But it can be taught. Yes, I firmly believe it.
Wow, Leslie, there's so much humanity in this conversation and in this topic. I know our listeners are really going to be excited about learning more. As we wrap up here, why don't you let folks know where they can get in touch and learn more about you?
Absolutely. So you can always find me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's my favorite social channel these days. I lead once a month LinkedIn Live broadcast called Fix This Writing, and we take a piece of writing that's not very good and fix it and make it better. And that's a great way to be in touch. I love Twitter still. And you can always find me at ewriteonline.com.
Oh, awesome. I think I'm going to have to join one of your writing LinkedIn groups because I can always improve my skills there as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for being here and joining us on the CX Pulse podcast.
Thank you so much, Amelia. It's wonderful to join you today.
Thank you so much for joining us on the CX Pulse podcast. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast is brought to you by NICE, the world's leading cloud CX platform. Go to nice.com to learn more about our innovative and comprehensive end-to-end CX solutions. That's nice.com.